Thank you for tuning into Radicards.com. I'm your host, Patrick Reno, and today I have with us Ryan Daly. He's been on the show before a couple of times. We've talked at length about a variety of different things. I've known Ryan for quite a few years now. He's a good friend of mine. So today we're going to be talking about baseball players, three of them that are doing well. I guess they're relatively new players. All these guys are in their mid-20s. And Ryan's going to sort of take the conversation and talk about player performance. I'm going to then couple that with a conversation of auction performance for the players' cards. And we have three players, so the three conversations on the player performance, three conversations on cards, and we're just going to kind of go from there. So Ryan, why don't you start us off?
All right, yeah, thanks for having me back on the podcast. I think this is a cool topic to kind of get into, kind of blending the hobby and fantasy sports. I'm actually surprised Topps hasn't really tried to cash in on it because fantasy, the whole industry is it's growing quite exponentially and it's getting very popular. So I think it's a really cool area to explore. And I chose three guys that largely went undrafted in a lot of leagues. Unless you had like a crystal ball or something, there was no way of knowing that these three guys would be where they're at right now. And they're all young and they all play for teams that are sort of in what you would call a rebuilding process. So a lot of the younger guys are getting some playing time and opportunities to sort of showcase their talent. First guy is Tim Anderson. He's shortstop for the White Sox. I own him on a couple of my fantasy teams, but I certainly didn't draft him. He just sort of broke out at the beginning of April. And shortstop, as we all know, is kind of a defensive-heavy position, and it's always just a plus when they are offensively productive as well. And that's what Tim Anderson has done, or at least that's what he was doing at the beginning of the month. And so he shares the middle infield with Yohan Moncada, who we all know is probably like the top prospect from last year. But his performance is sort of start to peter out a little bit. It's taken a dip at the end of April, and I'm sure if you've seen on eBay, the completed listings have dipped as we've gotten closer to the end of the first month of baseball.
Well, I am new to this gentleman here, Tim Anderson. I was just researching some of his card sales and seeing obviously what's hot. And, it's always clear that the Bowman Chrome stuff does well, regardless of the player. Bowman Chrome just vastly outperforms other releases. And I've talked about this in an earlier podcast. It's still very early in the season to gauge how well these guys are going to do. Look at, to your tone, like you were saying, if I could tell the future, I could, make a better investment decision, yada, yada, yada. But you can kind of just go with the information you have at hand and make the best decision possible.
Right.
So this guy his first official professional year was in 2016. He looks like he's with the Chicago White Sox on contract, signed through 2022, it looks like he was, I guess, kind of under the radar in a way, in the last 3 years. Well, actually, if you count this one, he's still very young. He's only 24 years old, and so I was looking at some of his sales of his cards. Orange refractor autos from 2013 Bowman Chrome. You can find them as far back as there, so pre-rookie year stuff. And obviously, that stuff's doing pretty well. This month so far, Orange Refractor Autos selling $325, $318. Some offers have been accepted for gold and green refractors. Black refractor sold this month for $249. So that you can get some of these lower serial numbered refractors for a couple of $100 right now. And so, I guess signaling to the market, a lot of this stuff is buy it now, OBO, most of it buy it now. Last month, the stuff was cheaper, like $169, $179. So his stuff's come up a little bit this month, but obviously with the the season's starting, or we're going to see a lot more action with this stuff, and as it's listed and sold.
Yeah, I think, and his prices might be affected given his team context. He's overshadowed by a lot of highly touted young talent. Yohan Moncada, Jose Abreu, Lucas Giolito. They were all, number one, number two prospects in their rookie years. Um, so I think he's been sort of flying under the radar. And I mean, if I had his cards, I would try and sell as much as possible. And I own him in a couple of my fantasy leagues, and I'm going to try and trade him away while his stock is still relatively high.
Mm-hmm.
I don't quite buy into him sustaining such productive levels throughout the season. That's just sort of the feeling I have. And yesterday he got into a little brawl with the catcher from the Royals, and it's sort of just another red flag for me. He might not be at that maturity level that we know what it takes to play in the bigs. So
Well, we've seen
now,
this. We've seen this before, right?
oh,
With
go ahead.
guys that come up that are young. I mean, he's 24, so he's not coming up as an 18 or 19-year old. He's a man, and so
Mhm.
we've seen some of this kind of behavior with some of our favorite guys now. Like I remember when Bryce Harper came up, he had sort of like this. He had kind of an attitude problem that he had to work out those first couple of years. 11, 12, and 13. He was working those things out. And as he's grown into his own, as you grow up, you start to make more critically refined decisions when it comes to conflict management. And so I don't hold these things against these players because they have to go through a lot, and they're under a lot of stress and anxiety a lot because their incomes are based on their performance. So there's a lot of stress there, and I understand. I get that. So I try to let that stuff go myself. So Ryan, tell me, do you think that Tim Anderson's maturity level is going to impede his ability to perform at a successful rate as shortstop for the Chicago White Sox this year?
I think it could be an issue, and as a fantasy owner, you're always thinking short term in the 2018 season as opposed to collecting. You might think that he's going to be a great star over several years, so you want to buy his cards now. But from a fantasy perspective, if he's getting in brawls and getting suspended, he's not putting up numbers for me, and that's the exact opposite of what you want. So my strategy this week is to maybe package Tim Anderson with another player and try and trade with some other guys in my league and try and get some players back where I have a need.
Yeah,
So
those are
that's
those are good strategies. I think about too, playing time. You say that Tim Anderson's overshadowed by guys like Abreu and Makata. Do you think that if he doesn't, obviously, if he doesn't get enough playing time, it's going to impede his ability to perform at any level because he's not playing at all, or he's going to be the second
right.
or third guy playing a little bit, and in that case, being undesirable as a fantasy baseball trade, right? Not something you want to acquire if the guy's not performing because he's not helping your team out. Does Tim Anderson have I guess some kind of probability that will disallow him from actualizing his full potential this year as a performer?
I think luckily for Tim Anderson, he plays on a team that's sort of going through a rebuilding process, and they don't really have any other talented shortstops that they could throw out there. And so if Tim Anderson played on another team, he might be either in the minors or maybe he might be sitting on the bench waiting for someone to get hurt. But luckily, the Chicago White Sox are full of young guys, and there are no big free agents on the team. Not a lot of money being thrown around. So this is sort of a good opportunity for him to shine. It's also a good opportunity for the next guy on my list, Matt Davidson, to shine. He's a little older. He's 27, so that's 2 years older than Tim Anderson. But he had a really hot start to the season. He's the DH for the White Sox, so he's hitting in the lineup right around Jose Abreu. It's a nice little 1-2 punch they have there. But he's got 9 home runs, and we're at the end of April now. So that's like fourth in baseball. He's up there with guys like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper. So it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, this guy's interesting. He's 27. He's the oldest guy of the three that we're talking about tonight. This guy was cool because he shows up in the 2010 Bowman Chrome set, which is one of my favorite sets of all time.
Yeah, you
And
have to go way back to find his stuff.
yeah, you have to go real far back to find his pre-rookie, first Bowman card stuff. Um, Great stuff to find. He has the autograph parallel in that set too. His stuff's performing even stronger than Tim Anderson's stuff. Orange Refractor Auto sold March 31st for $419. Another one that same day for probably something similar was an accepted offer. Yet another one. A lot of these Orange Refractors doing pretty well. Um, Also, if you can go even further back than that, he's in 2009 Bowman Chrome, right? He's even further
Really?
back. Yeah. So actually, I think that's just a red refractor, not an auto. BGS 95 to 5 that sold in March 29th, an accepted offer below 500. So his stuff is kind of like, I think, still under the radar. But if he keeps performing at the way he is this year, we might see stronger numbers for some of these elusive refractors of 50 and less print run. It's really interesting to see, a lot of this stuff right now that we're looking at with the completed listings of his are from March, and maybe that's signaling that people are hanging on to. Here's one from April 15th. It's a 2010 Bowman Chrome Gold Refractor Auto. That sold for 201. And so April 29th, Orange Refractor was sold for 177, so it's like kind of prices are. It appears they're kind of all over the board right now for his stuff, and maybe it's the volatility of his performance, like 9 home runs right now, which is amazing. But were those coupled into a couple of games? Were they like concentrated or were they spread out? I haven't really been following that. That's something just to think about when I think about quantity up front loaded. How were they achieved? How are those stats garnered up front? And is that something we can think about in terms of how we can look and prospect how the player is going to perform throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah, it's I think one of the big reasons people are maybe a little hesitant about his early performance is his age. If he's this good, why wasn't he this good at age 24 or age 25? So when someone breaks out at age 27, I mean, maybe he's the real deal. Maybe he'll hit 40 home runs this year. But, usually guys put it together a little younger. And I don't know his complete history, so maybe this is really the first time he's had a shot to be a full-time player on a team. I know the White Sox didn't draft him. I think he was acquired by them through a couple trades. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, he's a Diamondback in the 2010 Bowman Chrome.
Well, so this is interesting because that early pre-rookie year stuff. These guys, yes. To answer your question, he was a Diamondback in 2010 Bowman Chrome, and he came up with the Diamondbacks in 2013 as his first playing year with the Diamondbacks, and he actually played 31 games that year, which isn't a lot. It's some with a 237 average, and he skipped 14 and 15. But if you find him with the rookie card logo on his 2014 stuff, it's considered his rookie year cards. But he actually missed 14 and 15 in baseball. He's been with the White Sox since 2016, and I think he actually broke out in 2017 when he was 26 because he played 118 games and he had an average of 220, but he hit 26 home runs. That's not completely horrifying, right? That's still strong, and we're still early. Good. We're still early in the 2018 campaign, so anything can happen this year, and obviously his average this year is already very strong.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact stats on this, but I know a lot of people are impressed with him because he's been teeing off against really tough pitchers. So it's not like he's going deep off the bottom of the rotation kind of arms. He's going up against the Corey Kluber types in the AL Central, and he's having a lot of success. That's a really good sign. I mean, I think going forward, I'm much more optimistic about him than I am on Tim Anderson. And I wish that I would have gotten on the Matt Davidson bandwagon just a few weeks ago, because now he's owned by a lot of fantasy owners, and I doubt they'll be willing to give him up for cheap.
Well, if we look going back to the card market, his stuff is still relatively affordable. I say relatively because $90 might be a lot to somebody, whereas it might be nothing to somebody else. But if you're interested in that, have a look at the market, see if there's a card that you can acquire that's somewhere in his rookie era. I say that because he shows up in like '09 Bowman Chrome all the way up to like, rookie year stuff from 2014. So there's a lot to digest. There's a lot of options for those of you that are interested in his stuff. We're not here to give you investment advice, by the way. That's not our jobs. That's we're not qualified to give any investment advice, and I'm not going to do that. But I will say that there's a lot of great stuff out in the market for decision making, for choices, and it's just kind of nice to see that his stuff is selling well. But again, not dissimilar from Tim Anderson. A lot of buy it nows, OBOs. Very few auction style listings, and so that sometimes I see that as like the player doesn't have as much marquee value as somebody who's got a reputation over several years of advanced performance and results. So I see this as taking advantage of the market where they are right now to get a quick profit, which is fine. A lot of great deals can be had in those instances, but you have to also sift through a lot of overpriced items too to get to that point. So cool stuff, man. I'm glad we got to talk about Matt Davidson, and it's nice to see that we're talking about two guys that are on the White Sox right now.
Yeah, it's a fun team to watch. If I had more bandwidth in my personal life to follow a baseball team closely, I would probably go with the White Sox or with the Phillies, who is the team that our next player plays for, Scott Kingery. He was a guy that was on a lot of top lists, and so I think his card sales have always been somewhat strong because of that. But he finally got some time to play at the beginning of April, and he had a lot of early success, and so fantasy owners definitely hopped on him, and he plays second base, which is sort of a premium position. There aren't a lot of top-end second basemen out there. So he's 24, he's young. He plays for a young team. The Phillies, just like the White Sox, are sort of going through this rebuilding phase, and so a lot of young players are getting some time to shine.
Yeah, so this guy's pretty cool. I mean, they're all great, right? But this guy, he's the youngest guy of the three guys we've talked about today. He's just ever so slightly younger than Tim Anderson, and 2018 appears to be his rookie year in baseball. But if you wanted to buy some of his stuff in previous installments of Bowman Chrome, you sure can. There's plenty of items available. And of the three guys we're talking about today, Scott Kingery, his auction performance is the strongest of the three guys. I'm looking right now at some of the stuff that's sold recently. April 15th, Black Refractor number to 35 from 2015 Bowman Chrome. Autograph sold for just shy of $2,000 at 1944 as a buy it now. We have an auction style listing from April 16th, a gold refractor of the same card, 1281 with 18 bids. A couple of best offers that have been accepted, but below or around, I'd say probably $1,000 to $2,000. So his stuff does pretty well presently, especially if we're looking at that 2015 Bowman Chrome stuff. Now, I didn't buy any 2015 Bowman Chrome stuff, and these three guys are actually news to me. I haven't really been following any of them at all, so this is a learning experience for me as well. But it's nice to see that what's selling, and not dissimilar from Matt Davidson or Tim Anderson. A lot of these listings are auctions are buy it nows. It's still very early in the season. Not a lot has been logged for him. This will be kind of an interesting year to see how these guys perform. He's with the shortstop with the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah, and the guy that has the full-time job, J.P. Crawford, just went on the disabled list. So Kingery should have some more opportunity to string some games together, and it'll be interesting to see how they manage that if Kingery really does well and Crawford is healthy. do you give the job back to the starter, or what do you do? That's why I'm not a baseball manager. I wouldn't know what to do. But
Right.
I'm sure they're in good hands and they'll figure it out. But he's he's sort of a shining hope over in Philly who hasn't had a lot of good news in recent years, at least in the baseball world.
Gosh,
So
yeah, I can't think of off the top of my head. I can't think of somebody I remember recently being the Phillies superstar. When I think of the Phillies, I think of guys like Pat Burrell and Mike
yeah.
Schmidt. I go back to like the '90s and then I go back to the '80s, and then you can take it further back than that. You can talk about like Steve Carlton for a half a minute, but I haven't really been following the Phillies and the guys they've been putting on their roster. Jimmy Rollins was a hot Philly in the '90s. I remember. It's kind of
Jimmy
funny.
Rollins, well, they sort of fell down the trap that a lot of teams fall into. They had some playoff success and they won the World Series one year, and so they started doling out these huge contracts. Ryan Howard, Jimmy Rollins, the late great Roy Halladay, Cole Hamels. I mean, these guys
Oh yeah,
got
that's
paid
right.
so much, and once those contracts start to expire, they just do not taste good. And
Well, I
so,
mean, there's okay. So this is another conversation entirely. If you have a really hot player on any team, if I'm a team manager and I've got a guy say it's on a 5 year, 10 year, let's say he's on a 10 year contract, just for the sake of conversation, and in that 10 years, I get his best playing years of his life, his prime. I bought his prime from him. When the 10 years passes, knowing that he's past his prime after the 10 years, it wouldn't make sense for me to sign him a second time. I can put that money towards somebody else to rebuy somebody else's prime, right? I can buy
mhm.
some younger talent's prime, invest. This is kind of how a lot of these teams are managed to like keep it going. Then you got a guy who like say Albert Pujols is approaching his contract expiration time with the Angels.
Hmm.
Are they going to re-sign him again, knowing he's at the end of his career and the end of his prime, even though he still performs pretty well? Or are they going to put that money toward a younger guy who's approaching his prime years? These are the questions that are had all the time with managers and owners. Managers mostly, but this is the kind of stuff that happens, right? And then you got guys that kind of like they're into their prime, they're after. They're in free agency and they kind of get shuffled around to various teams at the end of their career. It's happened to Frank Thomas, happened to Kingery Jr. It happens to key, major players, but it's not a bad thing. It's just the nature of the beast with performance as a natural course of aging diminishes the quality of performance over time, and that's okay. And so you just kind of have to roll with it and see if you can keep playing baseball for as long as you can. I mean, heck, we're seeing this right now with Ichiro, right? I mean, he's in his 40s, you know. So
Yeah,
interesting stuff to talk about for sure.
and Ichiro says that he wants to play until he's 50.
I,
So
I hope he does. Honestly, I
I,
really hope he does. You know why I hope he does? Because he has a chance of breaking a lot of records if he keeps playing. Because
yeah.
that's another 6 years, right? And so we can see a lot from Ichiro in 6 years. As long as he plays games, as long as we play him. If we don't play him, he can't perform and he's just sitting. So um, these are good conversations to have. We're a little off topic, but I think it's kind of fun things to talk about. So, good stuff. We talked about Tim Anderson a little bit, his performance. He's still very young and he's a little overshadowed. We talked about Matt Davidson, who's coming up. He's an older guy, he's 27, but certainly having a great year. And there's a lot of potential there for him to have a high performing year this year. And then Scott Kingery as the youngest guy of the three guys who's pretty well right now. So, and on a team who needs to have structured talent on their team with the Phillies. So good stuff, Ryan. Thanks for sharing that with us. Do you have any final thoughts?
I think we covered it all.
Okay.
So I hope the best for all these guys. It's going to be a fun season to watch. And if you're looking for a team to follow this year, I think the White Sox and the Phillies would be a good bet. They're not going to win a lot of games, but you're going to see a lot of young talent start to grow and develop.
Yeah, also be fun to watch card sales as they kind of come in and
Yeah.
happen, like auctions happen and see who's performing well. I look back as, a lot of us probably do, and wishing that we bought more packs of 2011 Topps Update, right? I mean, these are like these are like things we're kind of kicking ourselves for, because that set is full of mega talent, and so it's fun to watch. And prospecting it's interesting. I like it. I don't do enough of it myself, but I'm learning more and more about some of these guys that are coming up just from conversations with friends and whatever. So this was a good conversation to have. I'm glad we got to have it tonight. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to Radicards.com, and until next time, enjoy collecting. If you like this content, please subscribe. Thank you. Enjoy collecting.